Hi, everybody. It's Steve Tarter, another edition of Tarter Sauce and pjstar.com, the Peoria Journal-Star, for those who don't know or looking at. My guest today, Sam Kherat. Sam, a professor at Bradley University. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah.
Sam's got quite a resume. I'm going to just give people just a brief look here, just so you know who I'm talking to. PhD in aeronautics and astronautics from Purdue University. Now is at Bradley, but had been at Caterpillar for 20-some years.
Yeah, just about.
Involved in the DARPA, DARPA Grand Challenge, and this was autonomous vehicles that went through the Mojave Desert or something like that?
Exactly. So DARPA, which stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, is affiliated with the Department of Defense. So back then in 2002, 2003, they had a need to save soldiers' lives in the battlefield. And so the creation of autonomous vehicles was a way to prevent soldiers from being harmed, because some of the convoying operations involve transporting goods. Oh. So they wanted to see if there is a technology that could actually help these convoying operations, because they can't really armor themselves since they're transporting goods, and minimize human interaction.
So that's like 15 years ago.
Something like that. Right.
We've come quite a long way in the autonomous world since then.
We did, and many companies back then were kind of looking at the challenge as potentially a way to create a technology that could help safety and addressing, especially I was working with Caterpillar back then, those dull, difficult, dangerous and dirty jobs on the side.
And CAT's had an autonomous miner, digger truck, or for many years, hasn't it?
Yes, late 90s actually, for aggregate applications. This truck was built to actually haul autonomously some aggregates, but the technology was still at its infancy back then. One of the issues that were kind of detrimental to a functionality of the system was the fact that it could detect obstacles or intrusions that could happen, but each time it happens, the technology was not smart enough to restart itself, so they had to call the foreman and come back to the site.
It would stop, but it wouldn't go.
You wouldn't go any further. So it was the DARPA that kind of changed all of that.
Now, Sam, you went on to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, which I think we were talking earlier is kind of a hub of robotics, and the many of the people that are involved with the autonomous movement now have spun out of Carnegie Mellon. Is that true?
Exactly. Since the late 70s, early 80s, actually, Carnegie Mellon was, like you mentioned, hub for robotics applications. In fact, one of the professors was called upon by the government to help in the cleanup for the 3 Mile Island incident. So that goes way back then, because human exposure was not appropriate. So the government was looking for ways to do some assessment and clean up using some robots, and that's how Carnegie Mellon University, through some of the professors, got involved in the field.
And now you're at Bradley, where you're teaching robotics and mechanical engineering, and also involved in very much on the autonomous movement. Every time I call Sam, like, hey, do you want to do a podcast, or you want to? Well, I'll be in Spain during the break, or England or somewhere. Most people just go to Chicago, but you go a little further. Sam, I wanted to, I thought people might have different degrees of awareness of the self-driving movement, the vehicles that we see, and I wanted just to read a few headlines so you can get your reaction to it, because these are just over the last couple of years. 5 ways the car of the future will change your life. You don't have to go into the details there, But do you see that happening?
Oh yeah, it's inevitable. I mean, when you think about the expansion of transportation and the fact that we're sharing an infrastructure, but we're using our own sometimes assessment. Yeah, we follow certain rules, but there is a lot of own assessment in making a few decisions. Sometimes, we don't obey the
We're talking about
rules.
driving
We're talking about
decisions.
manual driving. So autonomous driving is going to actually help in that regard. The reason why we don't see it, although the technology is there, the technology has been properly deployed in other applications like mining, construction, agriculture, where the difference is the fact that a mining company actually own the mine and they could build their own infrastructure and define the way to navigate within it.
Right.
It's different
On a public road.
On a public road, because you share the infrastructure, and yet you have a different way of approaching things because people think differently.
What about this one? Self-driving car safety may be the biggest hindrance in adoption.
Oh, it really is. It really is. And the reason, in my mind, is quite simple. The manufacturers have the technology to come up with very, very safe autonomous vehicles. However, they don't really coordinate efforts, and that could create some issues because if we don't have a well-coordinated way of sharing the infrastructure, well, the government will step in with some legislation, and that legislation could be based on common sense rather than what can the technology do. And so I think a better way to address the issue is to have a common understanding from all the players on how they could put together a set of modes of operations.
Yeah, because right now you've got, I mean, and I'm just reading headlines here, but you've got different companies grabbing different companies. Like this one was in the Wall Street Journal. Driverless software startup lands 2 deals. VW and Hyundai are working with a company. Ford is over here working with a company. GM is over there. You're saying, come around the table, guys.
Come around the table, guys. But also the technology is absolutely similar, across the board. That's why you see a lot of acquisitions, a lot of motion between talented people from place to place, where you see.
You deal with students now. Obviously, the students in your class are people that are accustomed to thinking about engineering and problems. You also probably deal with students across the school of Bradley. Is it sinking in that the world's about to change? Well, it's changed already. It's changing every day. But in terms of the motor car, that huge change is rolling along. I don't know exactly when it's coming, but is that sinking in?
Well, the students are certainly engaged and understand the need, and that's why you see a lot of interest, especially when it comes to robotics classes and all of that. However, there is this reluctance in the social acceptance from the public. We see a lot of applications, like I said, in areas where the public is not really involved, like construction, mining, and all of that. But it's delicate when it comes to an infrastructure that is shared by the common public. It's one thing for us to, for example, drive down interstate on 6 and hit a deer in the middle of the winter, and so we compel. We feel bad, but we compel when it comes to human mistakes. However, if an autonomous machine actually hits a deer, then you will probably see a big headline the very next morning.
Deer killer.
There's this social acceptance that.
One of the things that I think, and there's many aspects to it, but I'll just read you this from a story that appeared. The headline, or the lead: cars are going to undergo a lot of changes in the coming years. One of the biggest: you probably won't own one. and that's why.
Well, why would you? In fact, so what is it?
It goes against everything we've learned.
Exactly. But you think about it. What is the necessity for owning a car? I mean, is it a mode of transportation? So you could think of many ways of getting to work, getting to your favorite places. Is it going to completely go away? No, I don't think so. I think people would want to have a sense of ownership, but there's still a huge debate as far as liability is concerned.
Right.
So you could own this autonomous machine that could take you places, but who's going to step in when it comes to issues? But we could also alleviate those issues by creating a setting where all the manufacturers, all the robot providers, could have a common understanding of the modes of operation. And so that's why, for example, in some of the articles that you mentioned, you see people kind of thinking about scenarios that could create several issues.
Hacking.
And decision when it comes to failure of certain aspects in the car.
And this is just revealing my sort of ignorance or failure to grab onto what's out there sometimes when it comes to technology. But just recently went to Chicago and had to go to some place that I wasn't familiar with. And it was with my son-in-law who had his smartphone, and we did the ride-sharing, Lyft. It could have been Uber, but it was Lyft. And it was like a revelation to me because it was like, well, and of course it could have been a cab. We did take a cab there too, but you don't need your car. There's so many cars floating around, and indeed, whether there's somebody behind the wheel or they're robotic, they can come to you, take you where you need to go, and then they go off somewhere.
That's right. I
mean, that's the future.
That is absolutely the future. But even if there is a need for certain of us to have to keep keep the car handy in there. In my mind, it'll be much safer, and it'll be more reliable and easier. I mean, just think about the wasted time that people go through in the commute. You see I mean, the average was like 58 minutes per day on the average. Well, you could do some productive work while being in that car. And so you have an easier way to do transportation and even for personal usage, you have a safer, more reliable way to.
I'm just trying to envision. Rush hour, of course, Chicago is the nearest example, but it could be New York, L.A., wherever. A rush hour on the highway, on the main streets, when there's no drivers. Or they're passengers. And the cars are just sort of filtering their own way.
That's right.
Because heretofore, you get in there and you move at snail's pace.
Right.
And you rely on people to let you in,
That's right.
But now the machines will do all that.
Well, not only that, but also you could have a setting where the machine is going to tell you when you need to get up. In fact, like I mentioned to you when I was coming back from my European trip, I had an early flight, so about like 3:20 in the morning or something, I had a message from Google saying, "Oh, you need to head to your airport right now," based upon because I had it on my calendar, I didn't want to miss my flight, and so you have
because of traffic.
Because of traffic and also the distance. My hotel was a little far
away
from Heathrow Airport, but so we could have the exact same setting in autonomous vehicles. So based upon the traffic situation in your car, you said, okay, yeah, you have a meeting at 9:05. It is time to start driving, and then so you won't be able to actually miss anything based upon, because the information is there.
You're taking away people's excuses. I was caught up in traffic. Sorry, that we don't buy that anymore.
Because yeah, you have to be a little more disciplined based upon that, and it'll be safer. I mean, it'll be faster because of the communication between cars.
Right, and that's one of the things that's fascinating because, well, let's look at another one, and that's trucks, because sometimes they get left out of this scenario because we're all concerned with our own mobility. But you see those big trucks on the highway. Will they come before? I mean, you know, not that it's necessary to predict this, but do you see that as you know, the big over-the-road trucks will soon be autonomous?
Oh, trucks will be the first.
Will be the first.
Oh yes, no question, because of the need. I mean, there's a huge need in transport,
and they don't have enough truck drivers,
and they don't have enough truck drivers. Now, my concern is again legislation. Now, when you look, for example, the state of California, they're trying to build this elevated highway. I think it's 710 or something like that, to be complete by 2025. And it's dedicated to autonomous truck.
Whoa.
Now, is that
Wow.
well? This is one of the examples of, in my mind, bad legislation, because if you spread that throughout the entire United States, it's going to be very, very costly. It's going to be ugly, and it's not going to be
these
appropriate.
highways.
So, and that's why legislation is trying to kind of come up with some rules, but they're based on common sense. And the reason is because all of the suppliers, the manufacturers of robots and autonomous mobility platforms, are not talking to each other. They don't have a common understanding of these, what I call modes of operations and failure modes. If you have an issue, then the entire fleet has to know about it.
Would you say that maybe these efforts have been made, but isn't it the government's job to bring those people to the table?
Exactly, and it's up to the technology provider to make the government, to educate the government on what the technology can provide. And so we don't see that because of potentially IP issues. So many companies.
It's my idea. I'm going to keep it.
Yeah, it's my idea. You know, but you're sharing an infrastructure. You must share data. At least, so we're not asking for manufacturers to share what differentiate them. You know, for example, you know, the how the seat feels or how the ride feels and all that, but share relevant data when it comes to crossing an intersection, when it comes to
basic safety,
basic knowledge. If you have an issue with your brakes, okay, then you have to broadcast that. And so everybody is aware of these modes of operations. No, I am not really operating in a normal conditions. I'm trying to limp home, or I'm in a reduced performance type of way, and therefore I'm going to slow down. But the entire fleet knows that, and so it'll be managed adequately.
Okay, you were saying, you were telling us just before we went onto the show here that Bradley is going to be, will you tell it, in 2018 or later next year?
Right. So this came from the fact that we lack talent in the field. So you see a lot of manufacturers coming up with some very, very innovative solutions using artificial intelligence and robotics and all that. But we don't have enough talented people who understand and capable of maintaining and servicing all of these technologies coming.
You never think of that where, all right, we're going to have, you know, if we jump to the future and say, oh, they're all going to be self-driving cars. They still need maintenance at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the technology is very different. Robotics is a very, very transformative discipline. And it involves, in fact, several disciplines. And so I'm very, very excited about the program that, in fact, Bradley University is one of the universities addressing that need. So starting next year, we'll be offering a certification in robotics, and it's not a degree per se, but it complements any engineering degree. So you could be an industrial engineer, electrical engineer, or mechanical engineer with a certification in robotics. In addition, some of the companies might feel that, oh, I have some talented engineers working in my in my manufacturing setting or whatever. I'm going to send them to Bradley University and have this degree. So they will come back with a much better understanding on what robotics can do in the field.
Bradley developing its own center of the robotics center.
That's right. So the certification is a series of courses. So at initial start, we have 5 courses to be completed in 1 year. So within a year, you have that. That's right. So yeah, certification.
Now, you've been involved, or you're promoting the idea of. You've already talked about collaboration. You'd like to see it go one step further.
Well, because the technology is such a transformative discipline, robotics that is, we need a feedback or interaction with industry. So in my mind, the local industry, we have, I mean, Peoria is really a hub of robotics applications. People may not really see that, but we just look around. And all of these providers of technology could actually input the progress of the robotic certifications, because they understand, they know where they're going, and we have a need to test and build talented people capable of testing and understanding the latest technologies.
Different people to come together.
So the curriculum is going to be changing based upon the need. So this is a dynamic type.
Is it a big sales job to get a company like Caterpillar or whoever, Komatsu,
right,
to say, okay, you guys need to talk to each other?
Well, yeah, we need to spread the word, and so I mean. They absolutely, Komatsu, Caterpillar, Deere, and many other manufacturers have an absolute need, because the application is tremendous when it comes to manufacturing or agriculture or autonomous mobility. They have an absolute need to have talented people capable of quickly diagnostics way to understand issues but the most important factor is that all of these technologies are common. I mean, when you look at medical applications and mining, it's like, oh, these are but they use the same hardware. They use the same techniques. In fact, I was lucky enough to tour the San Francisco Simulation Center. And it's overwhelming. It's absolutely beautiful. And you see applications going from simple interfaces of the latest robotics hardware to robotic surgical processes.
Where's this?
This is San Francisco. It's a new center. They have
OSF.
OSF.
Okay.
It's a beautiful thing. It's recently.
OSF's just booming along here, I'll tell you. Well,
yeah.
that's true, because I think we've been talking about self-driving cars, but there's so many other elements where robotics are coming so fast. I mean,
and that's why the idea of consortia makes sense, because you see all of these players and having a need to test and understand the latest, but in order to do so, they have to spend a tremendous amount of money, because initially you have a piece of hardware that comes from, I don't know, Europe, Germany, or something like that, and so you're excited about this new feature. It's expensive, but you want to keep your supplier on check. Therefore, you have to go through certain tests to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do, plus it applies to your work. So when it comes to all of these companies. So we see a lot of duplication.
Right.
So the idea behind and the fact that we have an educational institution kind of leading the efforts in creating talented people in that space, it could be a center where all of these players could test and understand certain technologies at a lower cost, because they don't have to.
And if I'm not mistaken, Bradley just happens to be building a 5-story engineering business combo complex on their campus.
Right.
So it could be the well, that could be the physical thing, but meanwhile you have this sort of robotic movement going on.
Yeah, the robotic certifications is where I personally want to bring together all of these things. The Convergence Center is something kind of much bigger. It's
you can't help but notice it when you drive down Main Street.
It's going to be wonderful, and I think it's a wonderful initiative.
So you're obviously right. Just do you plan on traveling again here soon? I mean, well, your movements are vast here.
That's right. I'll be actually in San Francisco, February 13 and 14. I'll be a chairman of this conference on artificial intelligence, representing Bradley University.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and because there's a lot of discussion from not just the academic perspective, but also industry. We see a lot of industry is going to be present. And so the idea is to come up with a way to feed the government, because we still need certain ways to address liability issues, and if it's not driven by technology, it's going, like I said, going to be driven by common sense, and that could be detrimental, because certainly the government can create markets and that, but the government can destroy them as easily.
we just got to keep the government kind of at arm's length here.
But we have to feed them properly.
Right.
We have to make sure that legislation is well educated.
Right. Well, Sam, this is a fascinating topic, and I think we just scratched the surface on it, because there's so much here that we could be delving in. I hope you'll come back, and we'll go to I don't know if it's phase 2 or one of many, because obviously it's such a vast thing. We'd love to know how this whole collaboration thing is going. Plus, I just think it's, to me, and I'm from a sci-fi background here, I'm envisioning will we have machines that decide to speed? I mean, it's just you can't help but think about the fun side of this whole self-driving thing. But that's for me. You meanwhile get it going, and we'll have self-driving cars. Maybe not in your garage, but certainly to pick you up and then take you to school or work or wherever you have to go. Sam, thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
I want to thank Matt Dayhoff, who is at the controls as always, and we'll see you next time on Tarter Sauce.